if you could explain what is the crack?
Hey,
The crack.
how can I have the crack? What's the crack?
What is the crack? You are the crack.
Welcome to this episode of Audio Crack. We have a very special guest on today. We have Luke. You may know him from Instagram and TikTok, is Sailing Songbird. Please check him out if you haven't on Instagram, sailing_songbird, and the TikTok is the same.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so Luke, you have an amazing story. You've been posting some insane TikToks from on the ocean, close to almost Point Nemo, or pretty close to it, paddleboarding, far away from your sailboat. That's probably been your most viral video so far. But I just have so many questions about the journey. You're circumnavigating the globe by sailboat alone, solo. And I just want to ask, like, how did you decide to do something like that?
Well, I never grew up on sailboats and didn't start sailing till last year. So, it's kind of all still a little bit new for me, but I just crossed the Pacific Ocean single-handed. So I have a little bit of experience now, I got into sailing a few years ago. It was like the middle of the pandemic, and I couldn't get work as a teacher. I was looking to get a contract to be a fully certificated teacher, and I was applying and just couldn't get an interview. And so I was substituting. And during that kind of very sad, dark point in my life, I mean, it's the pandemic. A lot of people were not doing too well. The YouTube algorithm offered me a video about a sailboat that was like fully kitted out to live off grid and to circumnavigate. And I watched that video and was immediately just obsessed with what was being said in the video and about the idea of taking a sailboat and living on it full time and sailing around the world. And then I realized as I dove more and more into YouTube sailing that there was I'm not going to say a huge community, but that there was a community of sailors that we call ourselves cruisers now. And we just sail around the world and explore. And it's the whole life, and life is good out here, man.
So you started from Washington and you went down to Mexico. When you did that first original journey, did you think you were going to go across the Pacific? Did you think you were going to end up?
Oh, yeah. The goal from the get-go was I'm going to quit my job and sail around the world. Before I had even bought a boat, the goal was to buy a boat that, one, I could afford on a teacher's salary. So I bought a 27-foot boat, like pretty much the smallest boat that you can do a circumnavigation on. The goal was always to sail around the world. It was never to I'm just going to go down to Mexico and hang out there for a bit. It was, I'm going to go to Mexico, and then when hurricanes come up, I'm going to cross the Pacific to the Marquesas. And that's where I'm at now, which is the easternmost archipelago in the country of French Polynesia, where Tahiti is the capital of French Polynesia.
I mean, that's an insane journey. And just from the start, I saw you originally had some crew members with you. Were they down to go around with you and you lost? Or they were just I'm down for Mexico, but I'm not down for the Pacific. You're on your own there, bud. Yeah,
so I've had one kind of permanent crew member. His name is Angus. And when I was leaving Seattle, because I was a new sailor, I was like, I should have crew, because the North Pacific off season, I left mid-November, which is very much off season, is some of the most dangerous coastline in the world. I mean, the Columbia River mouth is known as the graveyard of the Pacific. And that's where we sailed. And I mean, the most crazy passage from that was from the Columbia River to San Francisco. And we had 6 days and 6 nights of 30-foot seas. So that was pretty intense. And so I knew I needed crew for that leg. And I put an ad out on Facebook, looking for crew. Because there's a bunch of Facebook groups that crew can get connected with skippers and captains, to crew. This 19-year-old kid from South Africa reached out. We hopped on the phone for 3 minutes, and then he bought a plane ticket, and now he's a lifelong brother. He sailed with me for 2 months, and then once we got to Cabo, he flew back home to South Africa for Christmas. So it wasn't that he wanted to get off the boat. It was just he wanted to get back home, see his girlfriend, be home for Christmas. And I actually have to talk about him a little bit more right now. Last month, he was attacked by a shark in an archipelago just to the south of me, and he almost died. He has very little function in his left arm now, and he's documenting his entire recovery and the entire experience on his own Instagram, which is The Wild Escape with periods instead of spaces. So if you're listening, check out my brother Angus at The Wild Escape on Instagram, because he has an incredible story to tell as well.
Whoa. So did he come out to see you? Like to see you get in, or?
Well, he joined a different boat, and he crossed the Pacific on a different boat. Actually, friends that we made when he was crewing for me. And so I knew that I wanted to cross the Pacific alone. That was an achievement that I feel like I needed to accomplish.
Right.
And he had flown home to South Africa and then flew back to Panama, to then cross the Pacific with our friends.
Were you able to meet up on the other side, or?
We didn't. I mean, the worst thing about coming in from 49 days alone of my Pacific passage was that I got on the phone with my mom, and she was like, "Don't freak out. Angus was attacked by a shark. He's fine, kind of."
Oh my God.
And that was really hard news to hear. And he, by the time I had reached shore and got within internet access, he was already back home in South Africa after going through numerous surgeries, and he was recovering in South Africa, which is his home.
What's insane is, in something that was really fascinating to me, was the survivalist aspect of being on a boat by yourself. You know, there's a lot of people who go live in the woods, but I mean, you know, they go live in the woods, they go live away from civilization, but they have the land around them. Like there's hypothetically food and, you know, ways to travel. But being alone in the ocean is a desert of sorts, where really you depend on what you brought from the last port, how far you are from land. You are pretty damn close to Point Nemo. And to talk about what Luke did is he went from Mexico to French Polynesia, which was a 49-day sailing trip over some of the, you know, the widest expanses of ocean on Earth. I mean, how close were you to Point Nemo?
Well, so Point Nemo is in the southern hemisphere. Point Nemo, for those who don't know, is the point on the map that is the farthest from land. And I was in the northern hemisphere. And I mean, in that video of me paddleboarding, I say I'm about as far away from land as you can be. Point Nemo is technically farther, but Point Nemo is not on any of like the routes that a sailor would go on because of macro ocean winds and ocean currents. And so I was pretty far from Point Nemo, but kind of, if there was like a second farthest point away from land, it would be where I was, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, I was still over 1,000 miles away from land in every direction. I also didn't, the reason why it took so long is I don't have an engine. My inboard engine had been broken for many, many months. And I just got used to sailing without one. So when I spent 2 weeks adrift in the doldrums, which is a zone of the ocean where there is never wind. And then, yeah, that's the craziest part about the survival aspect, is that with the ocean, you're always able to like travel if there's wind, but when there's no wind, I mean, you're stranded in every sense of the word. I was drinking rainwater to like keep my main tanks full, and spearfishing mahi-mahi, which I had lots of mahi-mahi around the boat, which are like the prized game fish. So when I was adrift, I would jump off the boat with my spear gun, shoot a mahi, get it back on the boat, cook it up. And I was eating like 3 mahi steaks twice a day for a month. I mean, I had so much fish.
Are you sick of mahi? Because
never.
It's a delicacy for most people.
Yeah,
you never get sick of mahi?
No, I could never get sick of mahi. They're delicious. I mean, you go to any fancy restaurant and you'll see the fish of the day is the mahi. You know.
That's crazy. I want to get into like when you were packing to cross, you didn't have an engine. Did you assume that there was a good chance that you were going to be adrift in the I forget the way you pronounce it, the doldrums?
Yeah, the doldrums.
I mean, that's got to be. A lot of people think you got a death wish, bro, and I know you got. I know you know.
I mean, it's funny because I mean I just started sailing last year, you know, and back
Magellan
in March,
sailed.
Yeah, like
Magellan sailed for years before trying that.
Exactly. Well, it's true. But back in March, my Instagram account had 300 followers. And then I posted a video and I jumped from 300 followers to 100,000 in 5 days. And so
Jesus.
for a lot of people, I'm like one of the first sailors that they've kind of become invested in, and they don't realize that I'm on the highway of sailors. Like I'm sitting in a bay right now with maybe like 50 other boats, and this is the off season. There's lots of sailors that are doing this. Most are retired, and so I'm like kind of the only. I mean, I think I'm the only skipper in their 20s I've ever met, other than like 2 other boats from my year of sailing, where I'm meeting boats every day. And there's only been like 2 other people in their 20s that have their own boat.
But are you the only one doing it alone?
Yeah. Well, there was one single-handed woman in who's my age in La Paz who brought a really old wooden trimaran down, but she had crew for that. But she is mostly solo, so I can't. Yeah, there's one other person I know that's doing it in the world. But it's rare. It's rare.
What would you pack to ensure that, let's say you got knocked off course by a storm and you had to like bring as much food as you could while maximizing, the nutritional value you had to survive? What were you packing?
So I had hundreds of cans of sardines. I had kilos and kilos of oats for the fiber. I had many kilos of rice, and lots of beans. So that was, and then I provisioned myself to have 1 can of fruit a day. That was my treat. And a bunch of vitamin C packets and multivitamins. And that was pretty much what I ate for over a month, other than the fresh fish.
What's kind of funny to think about is that the lifestyle you're currently living was pretty like kind of the lifestyles out there, of nomadic lifestyles. Like sailors used to be much more popular. Like there used to be much more sailors per capita around the world. So the lifestyle you're living is sort of like, a lot of people have done it. And I think today we've gotten more comfortable, like planes, large cruisers. Like the only people who got around were sailors. And the way, I mean, it's insane that you're sort of nomadic, but there's so much pressure to stay alive that it almost must be like the most freeing and alive you feel.
Yeah, I mean, my schedule is dictated by the Earth's tides and currents, and the winds. I will be able to be in this. I had to leave. The reason I left Mexico was because the hurricanes were coming. I had to get out of the northern hemisphere, and your options are to go to Panama or cross the Pacific. And I thought the latter sounded cooler, so I did that one. And now I get to enjoy the South Pacific until November, and then the hurricanes come up. So then I'll have to flee south to New Zealand, and so my travel is really I'm living with the Earth's on the Earth's calendar, and it's a really rewarding way to live, having my schedule dictated by the natural cycles of the Earth.
Now, how exactly does how do the logistics work? Like I'm thinking, because like hypothetically, I'm like, man, can I just like buy a boat and just hit the high seas? Like you don't have to pay rent. How much fees are there to like survive? And are you bringing cargo to supplement?
Yeah, I mean, so financially, sailing is the most expensive way to get anywhere for free. Once you get to the starting line and you have a boat that is refit, it's safe, you have a new rig, you have good sails, like once you have all of the equipment necessary, you pretty much live for free other than what you eat. I don't pay rent. I live on anchor. I haven't been to a marina in many months. And on anchor, I don't have to pay anybody. And for my food in Mexico, I mean, I was spearfishing every day. So I was, and then I was foraging coconuts and other like fruit and things I could from shore. So I was paying very little for food. I pretty much only like the only food I bought was eggs, and you can get like 20 eggs for $2 in Mexico. So financially it's really, really easy to survive if you have a small boat and live a simple lifestyle with very few comforts. It's very easy to live for a very long time.
How is the Solitude? Like, you know, there's all these ancient sea mariners' tales of being on the ocean for so long, and sometimes they'd see or hear things out on the waters with other people there with them. Being alone must have added a whole double. You know, did you see any mermaids, any sirens yelling to you from the waves?
I only hallucinated someone saying my voice like they were sitting on a dinghy right outside the boat twice. I only hallucinated that there was someone there twice. The Solitude's really difficult to get used to at first, and then it becomes the most incredible experience of your life. I mean, from day like 30 onwards, I remember day 30, I hit a big turning point where I was like waking up every morning, making myself a cup of coffee, lit some incense, and then just like read about Taoism. And you got to get kind of hippie with it when you're like that long alone in kind of the conditions that I was living in. And yeah, I mean, I just spent all my time reading philosophy, reading about religion, reading about other sailors that have gone before me, and learning from the stories of other sailors. And yeah, it was from day 30 onwards. I remember it just being bliss. Before day 20 to day 30, there was some emotional strife present, of me just being like, this is taking a long time.
A lot of the popular questions had to do with how did you sleep? How did you steer when you slept? How did you get cell service? And how did you have electricity?
Yeah, so in regards to internet and cell service, I mean, I lose cell service pretty much immediately, but I had Starlink, which is a satellite dish that you can run off the boat. And so I had internet up until day 16, where that dish then fell overboard. And then I lost internet. And at that point, my sat phone also stopped sending and receiving messages. And so I was completely cut off from all communication for about a month. And that sucked the first couple of days, not being connected. And then the pain of not being connected to the rest of the world goes away, and you just get to vibe out and do your own thing. In regards to electricity, I carry 230 watts of solar power that goes to 176 amp hour battery bank. And so I'm able to do everything that you would kind of normally do in your home. I can charge my MacBook, charge my phone, charge my drone. I have a fridge on board, a little 12-volt fridge. I don't have an inverter on board, and so I can't run like a microwave or like kitchen appliances.
Right.
And so I just have 12-volt, which is like what you would get from your car, like from a car charger. But I have like high-powered car charger that can charge my MacBook. So yeah, electricity, all my electric needs are met by 230 watts of solar. And I forget what the other parts of your question were. There was the solar, internet connection.
Oh, steering while you're asleep.
Yeah, steering while I'm asleep. So I have a wind vane. It's called a self-steering wind vane. It's not electric. It's all hydraulic. And you trim a paddle to the wind, and then it keeps the boat on course trimmed to the wind. And I can put on my wind vane and then go to bed and wake up 50 miles away, which is like on course, you know? And so out in the middle of the ocean, I mean, there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. And so when I got sleepy, I would go to bed and sleep a full 8 hours and then wake up and check my course and see, I'm a mile off course, but I made 50 miles in the right direction. Great. Time for day 39, you know?
How was keeping track of the time? Like, did you ever get off your sleep schedule, or did you just rise and go with the sun? Or were you just like, I'm going to take a nap?
It's pretty much rising and going with the sun. I mean, there's certain nights where I would have really heavy winds, and then I'd have to wake up much more frequently to check on sounds that are unfamiliar. If when you're on your boat, there's constant noise of the creaking of the boat, of the chafe of the lines against metal. I mean, there's hundreds of sounds, and you get used to all of them. And as soon as you hear a sound that you don't recognize, I mean, that will get you out of bed immediately, to go and check up on an unfamiliar sound. And so during particularly stressful nights with high winds and heavy seas, I would be up and down pretty frequently. But yeah, I don't really have I would just kind of fall asleep when I'm tired, and I'd be up when I'm awake. And
could you nap
follow
during the
sun.
day?
Yeah, I would nap during the day. A lot of the times I didn't need to because I was sleeping so well at night. But I was napping during the day sometimes.
Not even from the boredom at times. There had to be a little.
I was so bored. I was so bored for so much of it. I mean, I had one album on Spotify downloaded, which is I was planning on having internet to like be able to use internet throughout, and so I wasn't planning on like being off grid. And so I had like a couple games on Steam on my MacBook, and had like an album on Spotify downloaded, and I have a bunch of books on board. So I tried to keep myself occupied, but a lot of it was just bored. I was just sitting and being bored.
How'd the Starlink go overboard?
A big wave took it. It was sitting up on the bow, and a big wave took it. That was a bummer.
Was it like Wilson?
Yeah, well, I was hanging out below, just like hanging out, and then I heard a sound I didn't recognize, and it was the sound of the cord that goes to the dish rubbing on my lifelines. And so I immediately knew that it went. I was like, "That's an unfamiliar sound." So I go up on deck, and boom, my Starlink is getting dragged behind the boat 10 meters away. And so then I hauled it back on board, and I mean, it was totally waterlogged, salted through and through, and it didn't work again.
When your sat phone went out and your internet went out, did your family know? Did all the people, like, you must have been keep in touch with someone every day just to be like, I'm alive.
Well,
I'm alive
my sat phone stopped receiving all messages, but I still sent out some messages just thinking maybe they're going to land somewhere. And luckily a few of them went through, and my sat phone was formatted or was set up to drop a pin every hour, and it was so strained that it was dropping a pin every 12 to 48 hours. So luckily my family knew I was like still alive, but I didn't know my family knew. So when I got close, it was like 4 days where I was like 4 days away from my destination, and I see a little light on the horizon, and it's the first boat I've seen in 45 days. And I get on the shortwave radio on the VHF radio, and I contact them, and it's a Kiwi boat, and I was like, hey, can you call my sister and let them know I'm alive? Because there might be a huge search and rescue effort going on right now that I need to call off. And they gave her a call and let her know that they heard from me.
Oh my God, that must have been nerve-wracking as hell.
Yeah.
I mean,
how many? I was really worried that I was going to get into the anchorage here, and then I was going to be at the center of this big search and rescue operation because I went dark, and that I wasn't excited for that headache of having to put out that fire, But luckily, there was no search and rescue going on, which I'm really grateful for. I don't want to waste anyone's time out there.
Yeah. That would have sucked. You came in and you're like, we've been looking for you everywhere. And it's like, you're like a lost kid. You're like a kid who stayed out too late and didn't come home.
He was just like hanging out with his dog, in the park. Yeah. Everything was fine. Like, I was just vibing out, catching fish and enjoying life at sea.
That must have been the worst part of it all, probably. Like, because that was always in the back of your head.
I had told everyone that this is going to be a 40-day passage. And so when I got to day 40, I started to get stressed because I was still many hundreds of miles away from my destination. And there's a feeling of guilt of like, man, but there's nothing I could have done. Like, I didn't have an engine, the winds, I just got unlucky with the winds, and it took me longer than expected. I know it was a lot of nothing out there, but you took a lot of footage of when you saw something. Yes.
So what were some of the craziest sights?
I almost hit a whale, which was spooky. One of the most dangerous things for sailors and the boats that typically when a sailor sinks in the middle of the ocean, it's because they hit a whale. Sperm whales sleep just below the surface, and if you're traveling at a high speed and you hit a sleeping sperm whale, you sink pretty quick. And so,
oh my God.
Yeah, whales are the most dangerous thing for us. And so there was one time I was hanging out on deck and I was like sailing forward, and then off my port bow quarter, this huge whale surfaces, and we're on a collision course, and I immediately run to the bow and I'm screaming like a banshee, just to try to get it to hear me because they have really good hearing,
Oh
you
my
know.
God.
And luckily it like heard me and then like came around the back of the boat and then swam parallel with me for like 3 breaths, pretty close to the boat. And I tell you, whale breath is some of the most it's like the most infernal smell you'll ever smell in your life.
God.
It is the most rancid, disgusting smell that could grace a human nose. Whale breath is truly
So you could
horrid.
smell its breath?
Oh, it's disgusting, whale breath. Yeah, there's been a few times where I've been unfortunate enough to smell whale breath, and it's nasty. It's gross.
The craziest part is that ambergris, I think it's called, whale vomit, is used in perfume.
Oh yeah, that stuff is valuable. That stuff's super valuable. There's a spot actually on an island close to here that there's a beach where for some reason a lot of that stuff washes up, and so people hunt for it, because if you find like a nugget, you can be a millionaire pretty quick.
Wow.
Yeah.
A nugget.
Yeah.
So like this much?
I mean, a nugget in a whale, like within the context of a whale, like they come in pretty large chunks. But even just a little bit, you can make some money if you find one of those.
That's crazy. How small did you feel next to this whale? Do you know what type of whale it was?
Dude, I wasn't a humpback because I've seen loads of humpbacks in Mexico. I don't know enough about whales, but the thing was giant. Like I would say it's a blue whale because I'm looking at its blowhole and I could jump in. Like this thing this thing was gigantic.
That's crazy.
I know. I had misplaced my phone on the boat, and so I like ran around the boat for like a few minutes trying to find a phone to like take footage of it, and I found my phone while the whale was leaving. So I'm like, I have a video of me pointing at it, and I'm like, there's a whale there, but you can't really see it. So
yeah, I mean, that must have been insane.
Yeah, it was
people
crazy.
Have been loving. I mean, you've opened up the whole world to footage and imagery that like ancient sailors have seen in the middle of nowhere, like, you know, but you've seen, and besides being like, you're not selfish, you've videotaped it, captured all those moments so that everyone can see it. And it's just an experience that like is just, to me, is so fascinating. It makes me want to like go see if there's any kitted out boats to hit the high seas.
I mean, I spent 6 months salary as a public school teacher in Seattle buying the boat and then doing a 7-month total refit to the boat.
Wow.
And now I have an apartment in any major coastal city around the world forever. So, I mean, it was a good investment for me.
Do you plan on going back on land and being a landlubber again, or are you going to keep going?
I don't see how I could. I've had too many incredible. I'm so happy. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life right now, and
the freedom. Wow.
Yeah, and like because I've gotten big on social media, I now can support myself financially, and so I'm kind of just planning on circumnavigating for the next couple decades. I mean, I turned 26.
That's awesome.
I turned 26 in 2 days. Like I still got a lot of life ahead of me. And yeah, wow. I'm just gonna, I suppose I'll keep going around, you know?
Pirate's life for me. Like Brandy, you're a kind girl, but I'm married to the sea. That is like, so this next part of your trip, you probably already thought about it, but I'm a little worried for you because there's a lot more people in those straits. There's a lot more people who survive off the ocean. Not once you get to New Zealand. And I don't exactly, where are you planning to go from there? Because you might actually run into real pirates.
The major hotspots for piracy right now is Nigeria, and I don't plan on really going to that region of the world.
Okay.
There's not a lot of infrastructure for like Western sailors in Nigeria, and most pirates are shooting for the big oil tankers, and then they capture the crew where they can capture like a dozen Americans and then get a big payout. And I'm just one dude on a small boat. Like, I'm not a great target for pirates, and if I do run into pirates, they'll just want to ransom me. So yeah, if you could toss in a $5 into the GoFundMe to get me back, I'd appreciate it if that happens.
That actually, I didn't want to bring it up, but you brought it up. Like, the sailing songbird might become like a like there's a bounty just to catch you.
I don't know. I think that it's not really something I really worry about. I mean,
no, of course.
I think that if we're at like comparing and contrasting dangers, my work as a public school teacher in a major American city had and carried a lot more dangers than what I'll be experiencing out in piratey waters.
So you're heading to New Zealand once you hit a certain season, and then where do you plan to go from there?
So I'll explore New Zealand a bit during the southern summer, and then pop over to Australia, head north along the Great Barrier Reef, and then sail through Indonesia, hang out in Indonesia for a bit, pop up through Singapore to Thailand, and then I'll likely launch across the Indian Ocean from Phuket. So I'll do my provisioning in Phuket, Thailand, and then cross to Madagascar. And there's a couple islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean that I'll stop at and hit. But yeah, Madagascar will be the main is the destination of the Indian Ocean crossing, and then round the Horn of South Africa, around the Cape of South Africa, and then I'll cross over to Brazil, and then up to the Caribbean, to Panama, through the Panama Canal, and then either cross from Panama back to where I'm at now, or head up to Mexico, enjoy Mexico a bit, and then cross the Pacific again.
And I mean, the thing is, you're in no rush. When the seasons change, but how long you've been in French Polynesia?
I've been in French Polynesia now about a month. I've been here a long time.
And you might sit there for how much longer?
Well, I only have a 3-month visa. And so I need to get, after my birthday in a couple of days, I'm going to be headed to Uapu, which is the island just to the south of me, still in the Marquesas archipelago. And then I'll cross to the Tuamotus, which are like atolls, like super clear water, reef.
Wow. The
land is only like the highest mountain in the Tuamotus is like 3 meters off sea level. I mean, it's just like coconuts and coral in the Tuamotus, and then I'll get to Tahiti and then check out of Tahiti and head to the Cook Islands.
Wow. So you're about to leave.
I'm about to leave this region and then go to another region, but same country. Same country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then how much longer do you think, this is just fascinating to me, because literally you're just on your own schedule. Mother Nature's the only thing
on nature's schedule. You. Yeah. So after the Cook Islands, I'll then go to Tonga and then Fiji, and hang out in Fiji until November, when I'll then have to run south. And I mean, I have an option of hauling out, of putting the boat on land in Fiji, but Fiji is a hurricane zone. And so what they do is they dig a big hole and then they drop the boat into the hole, so that it's like hurricane proof. But then if I do that, I'm living in a hole for a few months rather than exploring New Zealand. So I kind of want to go explore New Zealand.
Yeah. I mean, are you going to be passing close to the North Sentinelese Islands by chance?
North Sentinelese.
North Sentinel Island, and I gotta tell you,
it's in
definitely
India.
avoid it.
Why?
Definitely avoid it because there's an uncontacted tribe there that will try to kill you. So just if you're in that area, I mean,
that seems like a good thing to avoid. Oh yeah, this is in the Andaman. That's in the Andaman archipelago. Yeah, I'm thinking about stopping in the Andamans, but because that island chain is run by India, you actually have to go to India first to get a permit to do that, like to then go. And Indian bureaucracy is incredibly there's a lot of bureaucracy in India, and so it can be kind of a headache for cruisers to get the permits to go there. But it's some of the most beautiful region in the world. So I would like to go to the Andamans, but I will likely skip the island where I will be killed.
I'm just saying, if you took a TikTok off the coast, just really quickly be like, "That's North Sentinel Island," and that would go mega viral because that place is literally. I can't imagine how many sailors have accidentally washed up there, or docked there. And just for thousands of years, these guys have just their whole idea is kill anybody who arrives on the island and that's how they've maintained uncontact.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I mean, I want to respect the wishes of anywhere I go. I want to be as respectful as I can to the population that's there.
I'm not saying go on the island, but maybe just buzz by passing by, can't go there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see if I can jump the hurdles of Indian bureaucracy to get the permits to go to the Andamans.
So you can't even to land, just to let's say you just go through.
Yeah, to drop anchor, you need crazy bureaucracy. You need to go through a lot of bureaucracy.
Or sail through too.
If you don't drop anchor, you're good to go anywhere. You can sail anywhere, but if you drop anchor, then you need to deal with the nation that owns that land. There's really no part of the ocean that's illegal to sail through, other than the South China Sea right now is kind of a hotbed.
Yeah,
I don't think China would appreciate you just cruising through.
Where are you trying to avoid?
There's not a lot of places I'm trying to avoid. The Java Sea is kind of known to not have a lot of wind, but I really want to go and see the Indonesia. There's not really other than Nigeria and the Red Sea, I suppose, where there's political unrest and a struggling populace on shore doesn't make for good cruising grounds, another place I'm trying to avoid is New Caledonia, which is an island it's an island in the South Pacific, and they're currently essentially going through revolution right now, and so there's a lot of unrest in New Caledonia, so I will be skipping New Cal for sure.
Oh yeah, so that's pretty. I'm trying to figure out. That's pretty close to where you are now.
Kind of, yeah. It's definitely a stop that one could make if you're then heading west from Fiji. Yeah.
Are you gonna try to hit Bali?
For sure. Yeah.
Bali,
may as well. But I'm kind of expecting that I won't really enjoy it that much because there's going to be all these tourists that just flew there and are
anyone can do Bali.
Yeah, one of the best things about having a sailboat is that you can go places where people cannot go. The island where I'm on right now, the only way to get here by air is to fly through Tahiti. And the cost to get a plane ticket from Tahiti to Nuku Hiva, this island, is the same cost as San Francisco to Tahiti. It's crazy. So there's no young people on this island, no young tourists on this island, because it's expensive to get here. But on a boat, it was free for me.
You are earning the vacations that people
I think
anyone can do Bali. You're earning the best one.
I think that's why people really resonate with what I've been posting, is because like any like because essentially I'm like a travel influencer, you know. I mean, if you boil it all down, but like travel influencers, they like hop on a flight and then fly somewhere and they're like, I'm here, and it feels. I mean, you think of the carbon footprint of the flight, you think of that they're only there for maybe a week. It can feel more shallow than if you suffered for 49 days in solitude and then arrive someplace and you're like, I don't know. I think people resonate with the rawness of life at sea.
You know what's really interesting is that you're going the same routes as like the whalers used to, which is something I've just made that connection.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. All of the whalers out of Nantucket in like the early 1800s, late 1700s, something like that.
I read Moby Dick once, and you're stopping at some of the same places that I remember in that book.
Totally. So I read a book called In the Heart of the Sea, which is the real life story that Moby Dick was then based off of. And it's like a real story of a ship that had encounters with a whale, not as dramatized as the scenes you find in Moby Dick, but the real life story of the ship that book was based off of. It was a great book. It was a great book. And it's crazy to think the amount of miles they sail, rounding Cape Horn in Patagonia. And then they come up here to where I'm at now to whale.
So when do you think you'll get back to Seattle?
Honestly, I don't know if I'll go back to Seattle, because my parents lived in Seattle, and then they just moved away from Seattle. They moved to Seattle after I moved there for college, which is kind of funny. Work brought them up to Seattle, and now they're moved away from Seattle. So other than like some college buddies, I don't really have a lot in Seattle.
When do you see yourself like finishing the circumnavigation from like to Mexico? So Puerto Vallarta is the easternmost port that I went to on this passage. And so I reckon I'll get back to Puerto Vallarta in like 4 more years. I don't know. 5 years is kind of the leisurely pace that is agreed upon by sailors. The sailors are like, if you want to leisurely circumnavigate, it's like a 5-year passage. So I could get to Puerto Vallarta and be like, okay, I'm 30 now. Well, now what? Like, I suppose I'll go again. Would you ever raise a family on the high seas?
Oh, there's loads of people that are raising families out here. There's lots.
Really?
There's lots of boats that raise families.
Like family boats?
Yeah, typically on catamarans, like bigger boats. So like the teenagers can have their side of the boat and parents have their side of the boat. On my small 27 foot, it would be really difficult to raise a family. But there's people that have done it in the past. And so, if I meet someone that I feel like I want to raise a family with and kind of get settled, if I meet someone I want to settle down with on a bigger boat and keep circumnavigating.
Sorry, that's a very personal question.
No, it's fine. It's a good question. I reckon I'll get a bigger boat to get some room. There's kind of a funny saying that if someone's looking to buy a boat and they're like, how big a boat should I get? You ask, how old are you? That's how many feet you should buy. Like that's how big your boat should be. So I have a 27-foot boat. I'm turning 26 in a few days. I still have 2 years, or I still have a year before I reach the point where my boat is too small for me, you know?
That's awesome. I mean, do you see yourself ever taking your sailboat inland? Like when you're bored? Of like, let's say you complete the circumnavigation, you're like, I'm going to sail up the Mississippi.
Yeah. Sailing up the Mississippi would require me to drop my mast and would require me to have a bulletproof engine. And currently I don't have an engine that works. And so I would have to do a pretty major repower of the boat in order to get it up a river, either the Amazon or the Mississippi or something like that. But I don't know. I really like the ocean. I like the ocean. I can survive out here off of spearfishing. I am also much more interested in the undeveloped regions of the world right now.
Right.
A lot of Americans ask me, they're like, "Are you going to Hawaii?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to an island 1,000 miles south of Hawaii where you can walk around barefoot, and I mean, there's no regulation. There's people are just good to each other because they are good people. They're not being good to each other and following laws out of the threat of going to prison. People are just good, and they just have healthy communities and families here because that's a better way of life,
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're not going to the Mediterranean anytime soon?
I really don't. I'm not that interested in the Mediterranean, partly because the Mediterranean doesn't have a lot of wind. And everything is so expensive, and you come across a lot of like really fancy, expensive yachties that are driving around big fancy boats. And I'm more interested in hanging out with people that live simply and are much more connected with their environment, much more connected with their families. And yeah, life out here it's a lot different than the Western world, and I'm in love with it.
I mean, it's something really crazy. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm trying to see if I have any more questions
Yeah, of course.
about your journey. The world really is your oyster. It's like,
I feel very fortunate to have found this passion so young in life.
and you've gotten into it so quickly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that like the fact that I had never been on a boat this time last year, I mean, that's not true. A few years ago, I took 2 months off of work and then hitchhiked around Mexico on sailboats, and that's how I learned how to sail from 2 months of hitchhiking in Mexico.
Now, how do you get into that?
Facebook groups. If anyone's looking to learn how to sail, hop on Find Crew, Be Crew. There's a website called Crew Bay. But the Facebook hitchhiking sailboat groups, I mean, there's loads of ways to get connected to boats. So I got connected with a boat on there, and then when I was down in Mexico crewing, then I mean, we would sail into a new anchorage, and I'd hop on the paddleboard that every boat has, and go and introduce myself to all the other boats in the anchorage and see who needed crew. And then I would choose the boat that seemed the coolest, and then I'd be like, "Hey, like, can I crew for you? Do you have an extra bunk?" And they're like, "Yeah, hop on, like, go get your backpack. We're sailing tomorrow." Yeah, hop aboard.
The cool thing that I love is how you've spent a lot of your time using your musical background to make sea shanties on the high seas.
Yeah, yeah. I have my ukulele, a baritone ukulele, and a guitar on board, and I play my baritone uke every single day. And I've been having a lot of fun with AI as well. I don't regard myself as a talented songwriter, but if you tell AI to chat GPT to spit out a sea shanty, they put out some funny lyrics. That's easy to write too. So it's a fun little creative outlet for me.
How do you balance, and now I'm getting more questions, how do you balance like escaping civilization in a way, but you're only able to do it by bringing technology with you?
Absolutely. So because I have a whole degree. I have a bachelor's in music education. And in my degree, I was performing in operas year round. I was training to be an opera singer. And part of being a music teacher is learning how to use technology. Technology is a big part of being a music teacher, especially during COVID. I was teaching during COVID, and I had to do virtual choirs, and using technology in music is it's a huge industry. And so I like kind of the videos that I'm making right now are really easy for me to make because I already kind of know how to splice sound together. I know what programs to use. And I think I'm a naturally like creative person. And so I started making the videos just as a creative outlet because I was used to performing year round in multiple performing ensembles. And then when I went to sea, I lost that. I lost the ability to make art in that way, and found short form little 3-minute videos to tell people about my experiences and my journey. Because I would say the worst part of being a solo sailor is that you have incredible experiences that you can't share with anyone. And by me filming videos, it helps me feel not so alone.
That's crazy. I mean, you could hypothetically record music on your boat out in the still of like a sunset.
Yeah.
And
I
become
have
a recording artist.
Yeah, I have. I recorded a song that I wrote early on in my Pacific Passage. It's like a little prayer to Poseidon for safe passage. And then I recently recorded myself singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow with my uke that I put on my recent waterfall reel of me getting a tattoo from a local friend here at the top of this huge waterfall.
Wow. I mean, I'm trying to think. What have been questions that people have asked you the most that we haven't covered?
People ask me so much about if it's scary out there, and like if I feel fear, and yeah, people comment so frequently about how dangerous what I'm doing is, like just about how dangerous life is, like how dangerous my life is. And it's become so clear to me how terrified people are of anything that presents as dangerous, and how worried people are about making it safely to their own death. And I'm not as interested in making it safely to my own death. I mean, will happen sooner or later, and I want to choose to live a full and fulfilling life. And so I tell people to take risks that are meaningful to them, to live the life that they will be fulfilled by, than being sad in the States, working a job that isn't fulfilling to them. You know?
Yeah. Wow. That's actually pretty heavy to think about.
Yeah.
It's like you're living. Other people are just waiting to die.
Yeah. I mean, I was there too when I was teaching. My classroom didn't have any windows in it, so I was getting to school in the dark, and I was leaving in the dark, and I didn't see the sun till the weekends. And so I had a lot of time to think about how I'm just going to work every day. And I mean, the work I was doing was good. It was important. I love my students. I miss my students so much. But I mean, yeah, it was like close to the end of the school year, and I realized I didn't have any real memories from the previous year. Like, I feel like I spent a year of my life just in a windowless room doing good work, but in a windowless room, and I wasn't living healthily. I wasn't thriving. I wasn't living a fulfilling life. And I knew I needed to make a change. And it was like sometime in March that I was sitting on a beach in Seattle looking at the water, and I just broke down in tears and realized that I was going to quit my job and buy a boat and sail around the world. And that next week I went to see a boat for sale, and I bought it on the spot. And that's Songbird. It was the first boat I ever saw. First boat I had stepped on, first boat I saw for sale, and I bought it and then refit it and went to sea. So it all happened very, very fast.
You named it, right? The Songbird, or did it come as a Songbird?
I named it. The boat was unnamed, so I was free of all bad karma from Poseidon to rename it. Because normally, like, renaming a boat is the worst thing you could do, luck-wise, and superstition-wise. In the kind of documents of the boat, there was a very, very old. My boat was built in 1976, so there's a lot of history for that boat that I don't have. But there was a very old survey of the boat that there's the words Pacific Raven on it, which could be the name of that boat, but then it had been unnamed like a couple decades ago. And so I stayed with the bird theme at least.
Yeah.
And she's still floating. So I think Poseidon's okay with me for it. But yeah, I named it Songbird because of my because I was a music teacher in the States and got my degree in music.
What happens if you roll in some port and some dude comes up to you, older dude, he's like, yo, that's my old boat.
Oh,
He's
I
like,
would be thrilled. Well, I was able
Yeah.
to get in contact with an owner from 3 owners ago, and I learned that before I bought it, it had been sitting in a slip rotting. A slip is like on the dock in the water.
Mhm.
It had been sitting on a dock for like 4 years, just rotting. And before that, it was sitting in someone's front yard for like 10 years. And before that owner, it was sitting in someone's backyard for 10 years. And so it really hasn't had much time in the salt, which is one of the reasons why it's in such good condition.
Oh, that's great.
And they were thrilled to hear that I had it because they put a lot of time and effort into rebuilding the boat, but then ended up selling it for other reasons.
Did you outfit it with all of the tech it has, like the solar panels?
Yeah,
The hydraulic.
I put on the self-steering wind vane. I brought the mast down and changed all the rigging myself. I had the rigging replicated by a shop, and then I put it all back, which was hard. But there's a bunch of great lectures on YouTube that teach you how to be a rigger. So I watched those lectures to learn how to do it. Because otherwise you're paying like 10 grand to have someone else do it. And so, yeah, I put on, the boat didn't have any solar on it and wasn't ready for solar at all. And so I reordered the whole battery bank, upgraded the battery bank loads, put in solar charge controllers, solar panels. I tore out the head, which is the bathroom on board, and put in a new one, which was a yucky job. And
I didn't even think about that. How are you getting rid of
waste?
Just letting it go in the ocean?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a toilet on board that I can pump seawater into, and then it flushes into a black water tank, and then I can pump the black water tank overboard. But when I use it, it kind of starts to smell. And so I rarely use it, and I just kind of hang off the back. And
You're just aqua dumping?
Yeah, it's the best way, man. It's the
No shame.
world's biggest bidet. And so I refit the head, because if I ever do have crew, right now I'm like a solo sailor, and I know that I will do, I mean, I'm 99% sure I'll be doing all my ocean passages solo. But while I'm like island hopping, I love picking up crew. I like talking to people. I like showing people my life, my lifestyle. And so it's likely I'll have crew again. But for the big ocean passages, I always want to do those solo, because the most unknown variable on an ocean passage is your crew member, like of how your crew member can cope with the stresses out there. And I don't need to add another unknown variable to what is already a very intense undertaking,
Picking up a hitchhiker is fine for like 30 to 45 minutes, but
I mean, I've picked up hitchhikers for like up to a week, and it goes great. Every hitchhiker I pick up is like always a pleasure to have on board. But for a month passage, I mean, that's like in the ocean. You never know how someone's going to respond to that kind of environment. And I know how I respond to that environment. I have a great time. Yeah. So
like if the dude tweaks out with you, like tweaks out and thinks you're like a demon or something, just starts sketching out, that's bad vibes. You can't bring that on the boat.
You can't bring those kind of vibes on the boat.
How's Starlink as a consumer?
I have had, when it works great. And when it doesn't work that great. It's rare that it doesn't. I mean, what we as consumers are asking of Starlink is monumental. And so every time Starlink doesn't work, I'm never like mad. I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to beam high-speed internet to me wherever I am in the world. But essentially, all boats now have Starlink. Every one. And yeah, every boat has Starlink now. And so it definitely has like the seal of approval from sailors. Because everybody has Starlink.
Now, does it, because I was thinking hypothetically of like re-outfitting a bus or a van, getting Starlink. not paying rent,
Yeah.
just gas and getting on the road. But they're saying that you had to like make it tethered to a single location.
No, you can use a roam plan.
Roam plan.
Yeah. There's the residential plans and the roam plans. And so you would use the roam plan.
Okay.
If you register in Mexico, it's half the cost. Just FYI. So if you're gonna get a van, pop over to Mexico, register your Starlink in Mexico, and then you're paying half the cost a month.
Sweet.
For the roam plan. So.
And also, what was land legs like? Like finally stepping on land for the first time.
It was so disorienting. I actually had a really difficult transition back to mankind because I had been alone for so long. I spent like 3 days. I like barely even saw a songbird. I was like on everyone else's boats in the anchorage. Sailors are super social. I mean, if you are like going by on your dinghy of someone's boat, it's like unheard of that you don't stop and start up a conversation, and then they invite you on board to like hang out, and then you're having a meal with them, and then you're going on a hike with them tomorrow. I mean, like that's just like how it goes. Everybody is super social. I mean, I'm on my neighbor's boat right now, and I met this neighbor in Mexico, and I was spearfishing around the boats, and I popped my head up and I was like, hey, what's up? And we started chatting, and then they invited me on board, and I was hanging out with them for like 8 hours a day for 2 days. And they gave me world charts, they gave me open source charts on my Mac. So now I have like the charts for the world. I never have to buy charts again. They gave me a little GPS stick so that my MacBook can receive GPS signal. I cooked them some pita bread. It's a super communal, like incredible society. I just like a half hour before we got on this call, a neighbor of my engines, I have an outboard engine on my dinghy, and my dinghy popped last night or 2 nights ago, and the engine was underwater yesterday morning, and so I have it in pieces. I took it all apart and I'm servicing it now on this boat. And a neighbor of mine is going off to live in the bush for a couple days, and they're like, hey, if you want to use my dinghy while I'm gone, I just filled up the gas tank, have fun. And so I have a car again, which is great. It's a super communal society of sailors out here. I mean, I could show up to probably a dozen boats in this anchorage and be immediately invited on board for a meal and a beer.
That's awesome.
It's
like
lake
neighbors.
Culture. Yeah. And I mean, like I said,
lake tie-up culture.
Yeah. And like steroids. I said, I met these neighbors in Mexico on a different continent. And here we are in a port of halfway around the world. And it's like the community of ocean going sailors is vast. And someone that you meet in the Caribbean, you'll then meet in Madagascar. And it's like seeing old friends, you know?
Wow, that's wild. It's just one big lake.
It's one big lake. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And yeah, if you do this long enough, you have friends all around the world, you know?
I feel like being out in the middle of the ocean would be a great place to take psychedelics when you're alone. Like in the flat, like doodad drink. Like, did you well, I probably, you got a lot of international waters to travel through and ports to get into. But that would probably be pretty sick. Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically. Definitely trying to comply with regulations of every country that you go into. It's super important because some countries you'll check into and they're like, when I checked into Mexico, I went to the customs office and the guy was like, "Tu eres criminal?" Or something along those lines. He was like, "Are you a criminal?" And I was like, and I responded, "Not today." And he was like, "Okay." And he stamped my passport. And no one came to check the boat, you know. And then other places you go, you'll have 9 officials that are crawling through your underwear drawer.
Do they search all your shit?
Yeah, they search everything in certain countries. And so definitely knowing what country you're checking into and what is going on. I mean, like if you like especially like if you're crossing to like another country and you have all of this fruit from this island, and then you drop anchor somewhere where you're not allowed to bring outside fruit, you can get in a lot of trouble for even just like transporting seeds, transporting fruit, transporting fish. Like
I mean,
they can be
Bali,
pretty intense. Yeah, they can be super intense.
all those Locked Up Abroad shows are about Bali.
Yeah.
Australians in Bali. But
so it's really important to know what is on your boat and what is allowed and what is not allowed when you get to a new country.
Yeah. I heard this, I don't know if it's a myth, but about sailors, they get their land legs.
Yeah, I call it sand sick.
Drunk.
I call it sand sick.
Yeah.
It's definitely after I spend at least a few days at sea and then I get on shore again. I'll typically walk around. I'll walk around and then I'll like typically sit down at a restaurant to like have a meal not made by me. And I need to like keep wobbling and rocking and moving in order to not get queasy as I'm sitting down for a meal that I'm like have been looking forward to for days. I definitely get sand sick.
Does alcohol help with that process? Because I heard that's why like sailors drink so much, like historically.
Oh, I think sailors drink so much historically because it's really boring out there. In my experience, alcohol with the motion of the ocean is not a pleasant combination. I crossed the sea with a couple bottles of liquor and like almost all of them survived the passage just because I wasn't really interested in drinking when I was out there, because the motion of the boat with intoxication with alcohol, it's not a great combo, and alcohol, I mean, you drink too much alcohol, you get more nauseous, and like that with the motion of the ocean is not a good combo,
Jeez. But crazy. It must be like you're doing something that like millions of sailors did in past times, but now it's a unique experience in our generation.
Yeah, when I'm sailing, I feel very connected to the sailors that have gone before me. I mean, when you're out in the middle of the ocean and there's nothing on the horizon, it's just blue, that blue straight line. It's the exact same. I mean, it's prehistoric, like it is the exact same environment that has been for millions of years,
So a lot of people I saw in your comments were giving you flack for not wearing a tether on your boat.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to people being overly concerned with safety.
Yeah.
My boat, I live on my boat full time, and the cockpit is my living room. And I know my way around my own home. I know my own limits. And there's times when the seas are high enough where I go, this is dangerous. I'm going to wear my harness and tether myself to the boat. And in other conditions, like medium conditions, a lot of times I feel when I'm wearing that harness, I am in more danger because I'm wearing something that I am not used to. And it is keeping me constrained from being able to move about my boat freely and to be able to move quickly and nimbly. If there's another tether that I need to worry about while also having to deal with an emergency on deck, I definitely feel I'm in a more dangerous situation if I'm wearing a tether than if I'm free and I have full mobility. I am unconstrained. I can move and do exactly what I need to as any situation arises. There's certain points where I think a tether is a good idea and certain points where it can actually hinder you.
I mean, it's your boat. I'm not gonna
Totally.
like that's the best part. Is like, this is my boat.
Yeah. And I've crewed on boats where the skipper has been like, before you even get into the cockpit, you have to clip in two places with a carabiner that can hold up an elephant truck and car, and they're super intense about stuff. And then I've been with skippers who are like, okay, you don't really know how to sail, but I'm going to bed, wake me up if there's an emergency, and are super relaxed, and I definitely fall closer to the latter. When I have crew, I have very few rules other than It's your funeral. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
You know the safety precautions. You know how to be safe. You know how to be unsafe. Do what you will. Please don't make me have to fill out paperwork.
When was the last time you wore a life jacket?
It's been a long time since I've worn a life jacket. I mean, I have like the fanciest life jacket you can get by Mustang, which is like the kind of premier brand.
Oh yeah.
But when you're a solo sailor, what's a life jacket going to do? I mean, if you fall overboard and your boat sails away, because my autopilot's always on. If you fall overboard and the boat sails away, if you have a life jacket on, now you die of dehydration rather than drowning. Like, great, you're floating. Now what? So wearing a life jacket is, again, it's only something that's going to slow me down and constrain me and constrain my mobility and my ability and my effectiveness to complete tasks and put out fires and resolve emergencies on board. So a life jacket as a solo sailor is about as helpful as a desalinator in a desert. Like, great, you can make water if there was some.
Oh my God. So like, it's just a difference where like, if I was wearing a life jacket and the boom hits me in the head, knocks me out, like I'm going to wake up floating and not know where my boat is. Whereas
like
just quick way to go.
Exactly. Like a life jacket doesn't really make much sense. Yeah, it's like a pogo stick. It's like having a pogo stick when skydiving or something. Yeah, I don't know. There's some metaphor that you could come up with, but yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, that's not a life jacket's not going to make you any safer. It's just going to give you a little bit longer of a prayer before your death.
And last question: when you were in the straits of I can't pronounce
the doldrums,
the doldrums, and you were on a paddleboard, paddling away from your boat. How the hell did you keep the boat still? And I'm like pretty lax, but that is the one thing that gave me like, that's when I was like, whoa, dude, that's scary.
It seems like a lot of people were pretty freaked out by that. I mean, not to like ruin the magic behind the video, but I had been adrift for 10 days. And so everyone's like, what if the wind comes up? I'm like, I would rejoice if the wind had come up. Like, and you can go fast on a paddleboard. I mean, you can go quick on a paddleboard. There additionally, when you're a sailor, you learn how to read the texture of the water to see where the wind is. Like, I can see a gust of wind coming towards me, and that, I mean, you saw the water in that video. Like, it's flatter than a lake. There's no wind, and I'm in a region of the ocean where there is no wind. So there's no way a gust of wind. It's not like wind just spawns. Especially when you're if you're like on an island, then wind can come out of nowhere. Like if you're close to an island, but when you're far offshore, the winds are incredibly consistent. If there's no wind, there's not going to be wind for a while. If there's a lot of wind, there's going to be a lot of wind for a while. And so, I had been adrift.
So how'd you get out of
there? Currents. I just drifted south for 150 miles until then I got out of the doldrums. And continued on.
How many days was that?
I was adrift for 2 weeks.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it was a lot of time. It was a lot of time. I just sitting around and spearfishing and hanging out with fish.
I mean, at least there's a lot of mahi to kill.
So many. Yeah.
I mean, did you ever think of putting a bunch on ice and it probably was way too far out.
Well, I don't have a freezer. I just have a fridge, and I would never take more than I would be able to consume myself, because that's, unsustainable, And so I would catch a big mahi that's maybe 3-4 feet big, and I could survive on that for 3 days. I'd be eating literally as much mahi as I could, and it would last for 3 days. Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm eating mahi. And so I was spearing a fish every 2 to 3 days for sure.
I mean, now that I think about it, it's crazy that, the modern sailor, circumnavigator, you're making your money through social media. But like back in the day, people were going port to port, just sort of taking goods.
Yeah, they were whalers. They were merchants. a lot of those jobs sucked. Like the old sailors, like those jobs sucked. They were making pennies a day, like a pittance. And I mean, yeah, now I have internet and solar panels, and I have the opportunity to bring in, like, to lock down big sponsorship deals. I mean, it's growing as, I mean, I'm the largest sailing channel now on Instagram and TikTok. And I have the opportunity to make so much money. I can, like, pay my sister's student loans, and I can pay for my parents' mortgage, and, like, support my friends from college. Like, I've got a great opportunity, and it's just from sailing around the world.
Now I got the hardest question. Probably I'm going to hit you with.
Yeah.
What happens if some company says, "Hey, we'll pay you a shit ton of money to sail this boat," and you got to abandon the sailing Songbird?
Well, so that's just being a delivery captain, which is how a large number of sailors get around, or like how they survive, as being a delivery captain. I don't have my captain's license. I don't have any sort. Are we back? It's trying to reconnect. Yeah. I don't have any sort of license. I have nothing from any government that says that I am qualified to do what I'm doing. It's not necessary when you own your own boat. And so even if a big company was like, "We'll pay you a bunch of money to sail this boat," they wouldn't legally be allowed to, with insurance and with regulations and stuff. So don't have to worry about that. But I mean, I have
even if they gifted you the boat.
Boat ownership is expensive. If you're not living on it full time. If you're living on a boat full time, it's incredibly cheap. But like, my boat's so old and small that I can't even get covered by insurance. I mean, I don't have any sort of insurance. So if I hit a rock tomorrow, I'm just homeless. I mean, yeah, it's a fine line that we sailors walk between homelessness and the perfect life, of life
freedom.
Freedom and homelessness are they walk hand in hand for sure. Because my house could sink anytime tomorrow, and boats sink all the time. And then, I mean, at this point, now that I have like a big following, I'm hoping that, like, if everyone gave $1, if each of my followers like gave a single $1, then I could, even if half of them, I mean, if 5% of my followers gave $1, I could buy another boat, So I think if Songbird sinks, then I can keep going, luckily, at this point in my life. But there was a long time where, I was close to rocks, and if I lost my boat, it would be the end, and I would have had to go back to Seattle and work and start teaching again until I had enough money to keep going.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time,
Luke. Of course.
For everybody wondering, check out sailing_songbird, Instagram, TikTok. Are you anywhere else?
Instagram, TikTok. I have a YouTube channel as well. I don't have any videos posted right now, but I have like 5,000 subscribers, and I think it's like 9 videos currently being edited. And so I will have longer form YouTube content coming shortly.
Awesome. Well, subscribe to Audio Crack on the YouTube. Check it out on Spotify, Apple Music. Subscribe, leave a review if you haven't. And thank you guys so much for listening. Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. I wish you best of luck on your journey. Honestly, would love to tap back in with you. Maybe once you hit Madagascar, but that sounds like it's a long time in the future.
Maybe New Zealand.
Hey, but keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration for all of us landlubbers who don't have the wherewithal or the confidence to take to the high seas. But thanks so much.
Thanks, man.